Luigi's Mansion 2 was a long-awaited sequel to the original Luigi's Mansion, and although it wasn't quite as great as the original, it was practically filled to the gills with lore, and brought in the Polterpup. Who doesn't love this good doggo? While many people enjoyed Luigi's first foray onto handheld devices, they seemed to miss out on the luscious lore the game had to offer. Luckily, you have this plucky professor to help you out. No, not you, Egadd. Me! And I'm your host, 24Kevin, here for 24Kevintendo, and this is the story you might not know about Luigi's Mansion 2, Dark Moon. Now, unfortunately, there was no story manual for us to go over, but luckily, the game plainly spells out the lore for us. Professor Egadd is up to his old tricks, researching the paranormal, but this time, he has a whole platoon of poltergeists at his helm, with hosts of green ghosts, known as Greenies, to assist him. Suddenly, King Boo appears, freed from his painting prison, but he's got a new hat, which helps him destroy the Dark Moon, shattering it into 6 pieces, causing the poltergeist to cause pandemonium. With no other choice, the professor pixelates our perplexed hero and persuades him to put a stop to the poltergeist predicament. The professor delves into his research and reveals that the Dark Moon has a pacifying effect on the ghosts of Evershade Valley, and you have a need to reconstruct it in order to save Egadd's friends. While traveling through Gloomy Manor, the Haunted Towers, Old Clockworks, the Secret Mine, and the Treacherous Mansion, we find out that King Boo has captured Mario in a painting yet again, and it's up to Luigi to save him. After retrieving the last piece of the Dark Moon and saving a bunch of toads along the way, Luigi is transported to the paranormal dimension. King Boo then reveals that he is capturing Mario and his friends after Luigi had him stuck in a painting for eternity, although it wasn't quite eternity, after the events of the last game, and plans to take over the world thanks to his power-enhancing crown. Eventually, Luigi defeats the evil King Boo in this dimension-shifting scrap and saves his brother with the power of his Dark Light. With the Dark Moon reassembled, the ghosts return to their gleeful gallivanting, and Egadd frees captured ghosts from his vault. Everyone takes one final picture as Luigi hangs it up in his home, and he's greeted by his new pet, the Polterpup, who, by the way, is seriously underused in the main Mario series. And that's the basic story of Luigi's Dark Moon. Luckily though, that's not quite where our story ends. In the months leading up to the release of Luigi's Mansion 3, we've been treated to several research journals published by Egadd, which actually shows off how the beloved Gooigi was created. In the report 001, An Accidental Discovery, Egadd has this to say: "Ghosts, spirits that dwell in the darkness and take great joy in scaring humans. Some of these ghosts have grown attached to me, and I've noticed, and collected, a strange liquid energy from them. I'm certain the liquid is the key to many, many new inventions. My many experiments failed to reveal anything about this particular ghost energy. It didn't react to cold or heat. I tried poking it with iron, pouring it on rubber, and may have even dipped my morning donut in it, all to no effect. But then, a breakthrough. I was restoring my scientific gusto with an exquisite cup of coffee, a Ludeman Greenie blend from Evershade Valley, when a stealthy ghost snuck up behind me. In my shock, I spilled the entire cup of joe into a vial of the ghost energy and it reacted instantly. The ghost energy began changing color, adopting the same green as my finely brewed beverage. After a bit, it also gained viscosity, and now it appears to have stabilized into an entirely new element. I've decided to name this element Goo. I must return to my research on Goo post-haste." One thing worth noting is there was a picture included in this report that showed the Dark Moon overlooking Evershade Valley. This would prove that these research notes were done before the events of Luigi's Mansion 2. But on to the second report, the characteristics of Goo. Goo, the revolutionary discovery that resulted from my entirely scientific tests of the interaction between ghost energy and Ludeman Greenie coffee blend. In order to determine the real-world applications of Goo, I've executed exhaustive research on its characteristics. My first test exposed Goo to an open flame. I expected no results since ghost energy has never responded to fire. But I was mistaken. Not only did Goo react, it melted away entirely. Clearly, it possesses a vulnerability to heat. Logically, I followed my fire test with a water test. I expected a new reaction, but to my surprise, exposure to water caused goo to melt away as before, suggesting a watery weakness. However, I did notice something different this time. To my shock, the part of the goo that had not touched the water, and thus did not dissolve, immediately moved away from the water hazard. Goo has displayed many other unusual characteristics as well. When poked or prodded, goo will actually push back. It also moves towards nearby sounds, displaying some kind of hearing ability. As best as I can tell, goo is intelligently reacting to outside stimuli. I've never actually seen anything like this before. There must be some greater purpose that goo can be used for. Once I get another cup of my delicious Lunaman Greeny coffee blend, I'll dedicate all of my efforts to figuring that out. On to research number 3, and the birth of Gooigi. This mysterious element I've come to call goo has proven unlike any other element I know of. I'm confident that I can make great strides in my research if I can teach goo to collect ghosts for me. My greatest invention, the poltergust, is undeniably the best way to capture ghosts. I realized that goo could learn to master the poltergust if only I could use it to adopt a humanoid form. The experiments began at once. I first created a mold that I could pour goo into. This went smoothly, and when I removed the mold, goo was in fact human shape. But only a few short moments later, goo returned to its original form. It seemed goo was not able to easily hold a shape without help. It seemed I was at a dead end, until I remembered the biological data that the pixelator captured when Luigi used it. Taking that data and converting it into an electrical signal, I was able to then input it into goo. The result was exactly as predicted. Goo shapeshifted into an exceedingly green copy of Luigi right before my eyes. I never doubted my genius. In order to teach goo, now in the form of Luigi, how to collect ghosts for me, I showed him the vast amount of footage I had of Luigi doing exactly that. Just as I expected, goo began to mimic Luigi's movements. He even transformed part of his body into a perfect replication of the poltergust. This progress had exceeded even my most ambitious expectations. I'm so good I even scare myself. However, I must keep reminding myself that all great discoveries require a disciplined approach. Progress in the lab is wonderful, but soon the practical test of ghost collecting begins. There's only one more thing to do. Name goo, who now holds the shape of Luigi. Easy! He looks like Luigi, so I shall call him Gooigi. With Lunaman Greeny coffee blend in hand, I must now determine the perfect place for Gooigi to test his abilities. Now this also leads into the remake of Luigi's Mansion for 3DS, and our research number 4, that nostalgic mansion. Now that I have successfully caused Gooigi to assume Luigi's shape, and I have taught him to wield the poltergust, I've decided some practical experience catching ghosts is in order. But where to do that? I mustn't forget that if I hope to make use of Gooigi's goo-based properties to give him capabilities beyond those of a normal person, I'll need ghost energy from beyond Evershade Valley. Thus, sending Gooigi elsewhere could solve both my problems. He would learn more from fighting ghosts, and he could collect ghosts for me at the same time. But where could he accomplish both of these objectives at once? As always, a deep gulp from my Lunaman Greeny coffee blend was just what I needed to think of the answer. The mansion where I first met Luigi. That mansion had been crawling with all kinds of interesting ghosts, so clearly there was no place better suited to this task. The mansion vanished some time ago, so it would be impossible for Gooigi to just walk there, but there is a problem easily solved. All I had to do was modify the pixelator to enable it to connect to the past. Simple. With that done, it was just a matter of contacting my past self and Luigi, asking them to help out, and sending Gooigi to them. After some time, I recalled Gooigi from his adventures to check up on him, and jackpot! Not only had he succeeded wonderfully at every test and challenge he'd faced, but he'd collected so many ghosts. With all those ghosts in my collection and a fresh pour of my Lunaman Greeny coffee blend, my mind ran wild with possible interactions between ghosts' energies and goo. So for those of you who don't understand what happened there, Professor Egadd sent Gooigi back in time during the events of Luigi's Mansion 2. In fact, it was after Luigi had obtained 3 different Dark Moon shards, which means that Gooigi was sent back in time when Luigi entered Clockwork Tower in Luigi's Mansion 2. Kind of an interesting tidbit that while Egadd was supposed to be helping you in the present, he was traveling to the past trying to power up his own research. Kind of a narcissistic thing to do if you think about it. But that leads into our research number 5, a new power. Thanks to Gooigi's adventures in the mansion in the past, I found myself with an ample supply of ghosts from that place. So equipped, I began researching ways to enhance Gooigi's abilities beyond that of any normal person. The first step was to analyze the energy extracted from the ghosts. Just as I expected, their energy was structurally different from the ghosts of Evershade Valley. Thus, I concluded that there are many types of ghost energy. Some appear to be large molecules tightly bound together. Others are smaller molecules, but no less tightly bound. Still, others have only loose connections to one another. Even with this discovery, I still had to consider what kind of special improvements I could give Gooigi. After all, although goo is made from the same energy of the ghosts of Evershade Valley, its properties differ greatly from the ghosts themselves. Unfortunately, this makes it impossible to give Gooigi the same abilities of ghosts, like being able to vanish at will or pass through solid walls. But perhaps there was something to the viscosity of the goo itself. Of course! Gooigi's basic makeup could allow him to slip into or through tight spaces, such as grates or fences, while still retaining his human shape. This could be the perfect enhancement to his abilities. I dare say it could be one of my greatest inventions to date. Suitably motivated, I began testing various mixtures of ghost energy and goo, seeking the perfect combination to alter the goo's viscous properties. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. In my initial testing, I found that combining goo with the loosely bound molecules resulted in it being entirely unable to hold any sort of form, and yet, combining goo with the tightly bound molecules resulted in a rigid substance that couldn't move at all. Like all successful, accomplished, and brilliant scientists, I continued to experiment. After more tests that I can count, all fruitless, I suddenly had a breakthrough. The final formula seemed to let Gooigi retain his form while still giving him a fluid quality when needed. A perfect balance. I did not hesitate for a moment before applying this new composition to Gooigi. Just as I had hoped, Gooigi was able to easily slip between bars or pass through narrow pipes. With my diligent application of science, I was able to create a new special power unique to Gooigi. I pictured a gallant Gooigi, master of this newly imbued ability, and I exhaled with satisfaction and a bit of fatigue. Having pulled off yet another successful experiment, I decided it was time for a break with a fresh cup of Lunaman Greeny Coffee Blend. Our final research is research note number 6, titled Gooigi's Weaknesses. Having succeeded in imbuing Gooigi with his new malleable ability, I began research into addressing his greatest weaknesses. With his vulnerability to fire or water, Gooigi was not yet perfect. First, I tried reducing the molecular bonds in goo, resulting in a mostly liquid version. My theory was that liquid goo could extinguish the fire, but alas, things did not work out. Although goo did retain most of its properties while also being that much closer to a liquid, it still melted the moment it contacted the flames. Next, I decided to try increasing the bonds of goo's molecules. I'd hardly started my experiments, however, when something unexpected happened. Just as I began to decant the more rigid goo, that darn polterpup jumped up on me in excitement, bumping the compound in my hand and sending it flying onto my head. Before I could act, the newly mixed goo began to run down my body, hardening as it went. This simply wouldn't do. The goo was already much too rigid for me to peel off, and as it hardened further over my eyes, nose, and mouth, I found it more and more difficult to breathe. Realizing the peril of my situation, I rushed from the room. As I gasped for breath, the world around me grew dim. Sometime later, I awoke on the floor of the shower. I still don't remember exactly what happened, but I must have made it to the shower and turned on the water to wash the goo away. If it hadn't been for its weakness to water, goo might have been the last thing I ever made. Not even a near-death experience could stop my inventive spirit, though. I performed hundreds of tests, carefully, but I could not find a way to eliminate goo's weaknesses. I now believe that there must be something in the process of transforming ghost energy into goo that generates these flaws. With a heavy heart, I accepted that eliminating these weaknesses was a task beyond even my own genius. Regrettable, but such things happen. Fortunately, I am gifted at finding the bright side to a poor situation. In the experiments where I varied the stiffness of goo, I succeeded in improving Gooigi's viscosity. His ability to slip through the tightest spaces is certainly a selling point, but if he simply fell through every grate he came across, whether he wanted to or not, well, that wouldn't do at all. Thanks to my rigorous testing, however, Gooigi gained the ability to use his own strength to slip through cracks at will. Additionally, with a new level of viscosity, Gooigi should be able to handle tasks that don't require too much effort, like opening the drawers of a dresser. However, the effort to do things like turning doorknobs and opening doors is too much. Such things are still beyond his grasp. Now then, I should document Gooigi's weaknesses. Weakness number 1. Dissolves upon contact with water or fire. Note that direct contact with liquid H2O will cause this reaction, but rooms containing water vapor or steam do not. Weakness number 2. Loses consistency when struck by powerful attacks. While Gooigi is somewhat resistant to physical blows, he cannot hold up to repeated or powerful attacks. Weakness number 3. Can't turn doorknobs. Things that can be opened with the minimum amount of force are fine, such as drawers or treasure chests, however. I find myself exhausted after my brush with a gooey death. I think I'll let the soothing aroma of a cup of Lunaman Greeny coffee blend wash over me as I ponder my next experiment. So that's the basic lore behind the creation of Gooigi, but there's one thing during these research notes that's really stood out to me, and that's that Professor Egadd, when he had the goo on his face, didn't remember getting to the bathroom and washing it off in the shower. Now, one of the things we know about some of the ghosts in this game is that they are possessors. These ghosts have the ability to possess inanimate and animate objects throughout the game. If this is true, then Egadd may have been experimenting with some of the possessor ghost liquid, and if that got into the goo, it could stand to reason that the goo possessed Professor Egadd, and if that were the case, could have forced him to cause some chaos, which could lead into how King Boo is released in the third Luigi's Mansion. Hey, he needs to be released somehow, and I refuse to believe that they keep fooling this genius professor into releasing King Boo on his own without a little ghostly possession. Granted, Egadd could have just ran to the bathroom on instinct, and this point could be moot, and Professor Egadd could just be a literal genius in intelligence, but not so good when it comes to the street smart sense. But I seriously think it's something worth considering. In the end, it's only a few more hours until Luigi's Mansion 3 finally releases, and many people get to enjoy this extremely anticipated threequel. And I, for one, am way too excited to get back to ghost busting with Luigi and Gooigi. But that's all the time we got for today's episode. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think about this and how excited you guys are for Luigi's Mansion 3. Hopefully I'll be able to stream it later tomorrow night when I'm done work if I'm not going out, or I'm done handing out candy with the trick-or-treaters. But other than that, thank you all for watching. For everyone here at 24KevinTendo, I'm your host, 24Kevin. See y'all next time. Hope you have a happy Halloween. Bye!